doors are open, so the doors are closed. For you in the room, my name is Mike Gorell. I'm the managing director with Index Data. I've been with Index Data for about 6 years. Prior to that, I worked for another large company in the library business for many, many years, EBSCO. Today, I'm going to talk to you about LDP and Metadb. Naseeb Nassar from Index Data was not able to join us here at WOLFcon today, so unfortunately, you guys are stuck with me. And hopefully, I'll be able to hold your attention for a little while. And hopefully, I can share some good stuff for you, some good information. So the session description was this, providing an overview of the LDP project, mostly focusing on MetaDB, which is the latest version of software. I actually have a slide on LDP versus MetaDB because that is a burning question in many libraries. What exactly is the difference? So we're going to try to answer that for you. And we're going to talk about how LDP and MetaDB is being used for things above and beyond FOLIO. And also, I'm going to take the opportunity to give sort of a general state of the union, if you will, on the overall LDP. So we're going to start with what is LDP, and it's actually many things. There's a data warehouse for reporting, which now is MetaDB. So MetaDB is a piece of software that is primarily serves as the data warehouse for reporting. There's also software that's been built that allows you to transform and load data from FOLIO, as well as reshare. Those are sort of custom intelligent transformations, mapping data from both FOLIO and reshare in its operational state, different databases. I have a diagram that I can point at, and denormalizing it and translating it into a data store that's appropriate for reporting. It's a platform that allows you to load any data set. It's not just a FOLIO or just a reshare service. And I'm going to talk more about that. There's also software that's been built that transforms MARC data into nice, beautiful columnar tables called LDP MARC. There's a piece of software that allows you to hit FOLIO's APIs called LD Lite. And so that's the origin of that software was sort of mimicking how the original LDP got its data from FOLIO. It hit the APIs and transformed that data and put it into a denormalized sort of data. So that is still out there. And then there's also an app for reporting called the Reporting app now that allows you to report within the FOLIO or reshare UI. And then also LDP includes a great community that offers support as well as creation and generation of queries and reports that we can all share and benefit from. It is also an open source project now, as you heard earlier this morning, a full project under the Open Library Foundation. So we're extremely excited about that. Long time coming. I'm going to talk a little bit about some changes that we've had within LDP. But we're super, super happy to be part of that. And we're expecting that to sort of springboard us into bigger and greater things. And we have a URL in a very, very modest website, I will say. So if you visit that, just to temper your expectations, it's not it's not the most exciting thing, but it hopefully serves the purpose. So a little history and sort of where we are today. So as I mentioned, Naseeb from Index Data really started this project in 2018. It was actually at WOLFcon in Durham that sort of the core idea around LDP manifested itself. At the time, the community was sort of trying to figure out what the right priorities were to get a product together and out there in the market. And perhaps rightly so, reporting wasn't high on that agenda of items. And so that was concerning to a number of folks. And so a group of people got together and really challenged each other on what are we going to do without a reporting platform. And so Naseeb was there, part of those conversations, and he took the initiative to sort of start thinking about this based on his background and some of the things that he was had done in the past. He felt he was a good person to kind of provide point on that. The vast majority of development for LDP up until now has been done by index data, and in particular, Nassib has been a one-man army in terms of creation of LDP. He was the architect, product owner, community leader, and software developer for several years. So, to be completely transparent, so that's great that we had someone as talented as Nassib to get this started, but also long-term, not ideal to have a single person really doing all the stuff. And so that's part of what we're trying to do, is transition into a wider group of people to participate and contribute so that the project remains healthy and sustainable over time. So kudos to Nassib. He's been phenomenal, and it still is phenomenal. But he sort of got it up to this point. In 2024, Nassib is transitioning over to some other really cool and interesting things that we have going on that we're helping with at Index Data. And so that we're using that as sort of a nice inflection point to try to redistribute some of the responsibilities of LDP. So instead of being a one-man band, we're applying some more diverse people from Index Data, but also trying to help the community participate and help shepherd and lead, because we know that's really important. EBSCO has contributed ideas and requirements and code. So I want to thank EBSCO for that. And so it's not, as I said, or alluded to a little bit, LDP hasn't been as easy to contribute to as we would like in the past, but we're making changes in that direction. And so I think the future is bright. So as we are in 2024 and looking into 2025, we're looking at formalizing some of the processes around creation of the software roadmap, contributions, testing, release plans, those kinds of things. And so, again, that's part of the transition that I referred to earlier. We're able to take more input from the community and from within Index Data and try to, again, make those processes more formal and add some transparency into what's happening. As a full project under the OLF, we're looking forward to some of the things that provides. I mentioned down to the bottom a wiki, some of the just infrastructure that's out there for Slack, and some of the other things. We're looking forward to that. We've identified what we're calling an official beta partner, and CU Boulder, University of Colorado Boulder. And so the idea there is to have a first sort of burn-in site where we can deploy new software, make sure that they put it through its paces before it's available for a more broad general distribution. Really, this is another, again, sort of maturation of where we've been at Index Data with LDP. In the past, we would sort of scrape together tenants sort of on an ad hoc basis to test some of the software, and that causes delays and it's sort of suboptimal. So we're trying to formalize that. We're also trying to identify release window targets. And so we've talked to CU Boulder about, okay, so roughly let's sort of block off October, January, April, and July as potential. We're not saying that's always going to be, but potential release areas, release windows. And so we have some software some changes that have been built up, and we're sort of ready. So I think that this October, we actually will have packages for both Metadb as well as some of the FOLIO analytics queries to get into that testing cycle in October. And I'll be totally transparent. We're not sure what our pace is going to be. So I'm not sure that we can go from October and January and April and July, but we'll see. We'll see how many changes we can maintain and push through. Another important thing, back to sort of we were begging and borrowing for certain things for a long time with LDP, and environments is one that has been really important for the FOLIO community. So we're committed to creating an environment within the FOLIO community that is going to allow us to test Metadb against upcoming and very recent FOLIO releases. And so to to step in, I'm maybe getting a little bit ahead of myself, but hopefully everybody has a sense for LDP. So we're basically trying to take all of the folio data and represent it in a reporting solution. And so as you add functionality to folio, there's like the chicken and the egg thing, right? So if folio is planning on certain features, you want to build analytics against that. But until that's solid enough, it's really hard to plan. Until now, basically what's happened is the release goes live, and months later, people are sort of catching up with derived table queries, and I'll talk a little bit about what that is, but all those kinds of things. And so it's really, sort of 2 or 3 or 4 months after a release is out that the analytics is able to catch up. So we're trying to improve that cycle a little bit. And so the idea is that, if we had this environment right now, it'd be running Quesnelia, if that's how we pronounce it. Some of us pronounce it quesadilla. So if the quesadilla relay, would be aligned with a quesadilla release. And then as Ramson's gets closer, sort of toward the end of the year, that's when we would deploy it. It's kind of also in line with Bugfest. And for those of you who don't know, this Bugfest is hosted by EBSCO. They don't have as much experience in MetaDB as we do. And so what we're thinking is that we're going to take that on, we being Index Data, take that on to host this MetaDB-based environment for those users that are interested in that, trying to keep it up to speed with the latest folio releases. And then what we would think is that the analytics queries that are part of the community would then be available sometime in January. If Ramson's is released as is scheduled in December, then, sort of maybe a month later, we might have those analytics queries updated to account for that. And I have a question in the audience. Okay, so the question is, why don't we have, if I can understand the question, why don't we have a Quesnelia release and a Ramson's release environment? Right. Effort, expense, maybe. And for what we've heard from the community so far is that where they're going from nothing to this kind of idea that they're very excited about. And if we're able to sort of sync up with what is the release plans of past and future folio adopters, then that would be good. That's a good point. We can go consider that. We're not sure quite yet exactly how extensive the data set is going to be. Like Bugfest is a very large data set, I believe. I don't know if it still is, but I believe it originally was seeded with University of Chicago data. Is that still the case? And so that's that's 8 million-ish instances. And so I'm not sure what this environment, we haven't decided yet how big this environment is going to be. I'm going to venture to say that it's not going to be as big. It'll probably be beefy, but not 8 million beefy. And so we'll see. But the point is the need we were trying to meet here is making sure that the folio analytics community had a chance to test queries before the release was actually out. That was sort of the main thing that we don't have that we're gaining with this. All right. Are there other questions from the audience before I go to the next slide? Yes, sir. Yes. Yeah, it is. I mean, there's a lot of simplification going on in this slide, but the need that I mentioned earlier about being able to test queries against the upcoming release is really important. But by the same token, many people are going to be on Quesnelia or Quesadilla, depending on where you're from, for a long time being, April. And so not having a Quesnelia MetaDB folio public test environment for 4 or 5 months that also might be problematic. And so we'll just have to see what, what happens. Okay. So burning question, what the heck is it MetaDB versus LDP? And so this is sort of a historical thing. LDP, when it was originally developed, was both the project name as well as that core data warehouse software. So they're both LDP. And at a point in time, it became clear that there was a really big enhancement that we could make to move from batch loading. Essentially, LDP is built on taking a copy of your Folio database every night, or your Folio databases every night, transforming that all, loading it into LDP. And so there are several issues with that, but that was the general approach. MetaDB is built on, and I'm going to show sort of a diagram on this. It's built more on the idea of being able to stream database updates into your data warehouse. And so at that point of making that sort of really core change, the decision was to rename it, and MetaDB was chosen as the name. So it's really, MetaDB is now that core software that runs the data warehouse. LDP remains the overall project name. But essentially the future focus and development has been for a while on MetaDB, and will continue to be on that. I'm anticipating a question that I'm not going to talk about right now from the audience, but we have a slide for when LDP goes away. All right, so quick little diagram. The point here is to identify that LDP is a separate system from Folio. The way that it sort of today integrates with Folio is that message queue. And so there are things that are attached to all of the different storage modules, the databases that are running the storage modules, or the storage modules are taking advantage of, called Debezium, which basically it's a logical replication model. And so your Folio databases are set up for logical replication, and we have software that can put those changes on a message queue, a Kafka message queue. And then we have software that picks stuff off of that message queue, processes it, and then updates things into your MetaDB data warehouse. So depending on, your mileage may vary, but within seconds, typically, normal transactions can be reflected in MetaDB. So it is very, very fast. Another thing that is interesting for us is Folio can be hosted separately from MetaDB. So we've proven this ourselves with Stanford. Index Data is managing Stanford's MetaDB instance. Stanford is hosting themselves in their own data center. And so we're able to organize that and manage that as well. So that's something else that's interesting. Yes, Mark. Yes, so Folio is hosted by Stanford in their data center. They're one of their local data centers. We're hosting MetaDB for them in their AWS instance. So it's a Stanford AWS account. And they've given us the things that we need to go deploy, install, monitor, et cetera. Yep. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about usage of MetaDB and LDP outside of Folio. So hopefully you guys find this interesting. So one of the things that was a key requirement for the reshare project was have the reporting platform. We immediately looked to LDP to service that need. What we're seeing here is a couple little screen clips of a reporting portal that was set up for Palsy. Palsy is one of the networks, the first network that adopted reshare. And there's a number of reports that are specific to resource sharing, ILL kind of activity. And so the point here is the same kind of streaming activity, the same kind of data mapping that was done with Folio has been done for reshare. Things are processed, requests are processed, by the instantaneously as I just talked about in Folio, only for sort of a completely different domain, completely different system. Reshare doesn't use all of the same. Reshare is based on similar technology as Folio, but it doesn't use all of the same. I'm blanking on the word that I want to say because it's the perfect word. the same sort of standards for the technology base underneath, and patterns that are used in Folio aren't always used in Reshare. And so there was that kind of difference. We also have a consortia who's using Reshare, the IVs Plus, and they have a reporting product that actually pulls data from LDP into their own sort of custom reporting. So it's sort of, they're using LDP as an aggregator, not as necessarily a reporting platform. And they pull into their reporting platform directly from LDP. So I thought that's an interesting twist for a subset of those organizations in IVs Plus. So I was trying to find a cool way to represent this, and I don't know if I succeeded. But when we implemented, Index Data implemented Folio for the University of Chicago, they had several legacy Microsoft Access apps that they wanted to deal with. And these Microsoft Access apps had been designed for Olay, their ILS system from before Folio. And so the people that built those Microsoft Access apps had spread out into other areas. They were no longer sort of in the same positions that they were. So they didn't have resources to necessarily go tweak the Microsoft Access apps. So what we did is we worked to move the storage from the Microsoft Access apps and put that into LDP. And so from the Microsoft Access apps, very little change. They sort of changed from a local storage to a remote storage. I'm not sure of the correct terminology for Microsoft Access apps. I haven't used those in a number of years. But basically, we were able to change the data store, but they thought they were talking to Olay. They still think they're talking to Olay. So we did some mapping. We imported the data, did some mappings, updated the drivers, that kind of stuff. And we're able to use MetaDB in this instance to address Microsoft Access apps needs. We have a couple of examples where we've taken legacy data for institutions moving to Folio, and we pulled specific extracted data. So when we talk to customers or prospects or partners about migrating to Folio, one of the things that we warn them about is, taking all of your historical loan data or all of your historical purchasing data and trying to fit that into Folio you're maybe not going to get the kind of payback that you expect. It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to be messy, may not actually work cleanly. Maybe it's not worth it. So maybe instead you can look at taking the data as is and pull that into your reporting system. And so what we've done here, we're showing two different implementations of the same idea, both at CU Boulder and Stanford. They identified key data. We or they extracted it out of the current ILS system. We built tables. We set up schemas, index data, sort of implemented that for them. And so now they have schemas in their LDP that represent sort of their old pre-Folio data. And so they're able to do queries across schemas and joins and so forth so that they can get sort of a single pane of glass. Is that one of those buzzwordy expressions that people use? Single pane of glass. Yeah. So they have something like that over there. Yes, sir. Exactly. You don't have to be an index data hosted site to do that. It's again, pointing at the sort of generalization of the reporting data warehouse. We have also taken, for smaller customers, I will say, loaded their entire legacy system database. So this particular one is Sierra. And so we took the Sierra schema and dumped it and replicated into LDP so that they're able to go query their old data with all the same queries, all the same exact SQL that they had used and been comfortable with from the beginning. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is something that many of you may not have heard of. It's a really cool thing. This is one of the things that Nasib is helping us figure out. CCLP is a collaborative collection lifecycle project. And I don't know if I have Boaz in the room by any chance. I don't. Okay. Boaz is one of the founders or core instigators of this project. So it's an IMLS funded project. There are three PIs, and I wish I knew what that stood for in this context. Principal investigators. So that's NISO, PALC, and Lehigh. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about what the goal of this is, but the project has been kicked off. It started in probably late 2022 or early 2023. Index data is the one providing the technical direction. We're working with Philip from Samsung, the same person that we worked with early days for Folio, as sort of the UX functional analysis guru. It has a very similar trajectory as Folio and Reshare and other open source projects that are part of OLF, and that we're building a community. We are setting up a governance structure. We're building things according to open standards, obviously involving NISO, open source of the middleware and support software. And the goal is collaborative collection lifecycle management. Right now, we're in the analysis, design, and prototyping phase. So the key concept with CCLP is that you're going to pull data, all kinds of data from different sources. So you're going to pull bid data, holdings data, usage data, vendor data. So we have publishers that we're working with to contribute. And then you're going to allow libraries to sort of tag markers is the term that they're using, this data, query this data, collect it to create lists. And so really the goal is to output lists. Some of these concepts are similar in some of the other systems that people may be familiar with in terms of collection development, but there are profiles that we create that sort of are used to filter data and get us to the point where we have lists that can be transacted on. So a couple of very early exploratory wireframes, but again, sort of we're dealing with data. We have profiles, we have lists, and we're building out screens. And this is sort of the stage that we're at right now, trying to verify what kind of use cases we have. And these gray boxes are pretty interesting, so I thought I'd show them. But really, the key interesting part for us is this ecosystem. And so we're thinking that the apps that are going to be built are going to be very similar to some of the Folio apps that we're used to, that some of us are used to. Stripes, Okapi, Eureka, we'll see what that is on the background. We may also build some standalone products. We also are anticipating some of the vendors that we're working with to include technology and software that integrate with the system. We're thinking sort of big, open. And then we have, I mentioned objects, data, profiles, and lists. And then we have some middleware here. And so we're seeing MetaDB here as a key piece to allow us to understand, search, explore, categorize, surface for users, all these different data types. And so we're thinking that this is going to be like a key engine as part of the overall CCLP is the MetaDB data warehouse. Reservoir is a piece of software that's from the Reshare project that's generalized. It's a very simple standardized data store that is actually very fast. Pod is a project from Stanford and Ivy Plus to basically collect collections of data and be able to redistribute or share them independently from the organizations. And so it's sort of, does Pod have Pod seems like it's an acronym. Platform for Open Data. Thank you. I knew that at one point. And so we're looking at, we're exploring exactly how, what the data formats are. And I'm going to go back to, hit the right up arrow. So this data that's in the middle column. So right now we're in the process of not only thinking through what are the use cases and workflow patterns for collection lifecycle stuff, but also what's the data that's going to be important. And we're trying to, there are a lot of aspirations here about being able to see sort of 360 degrees of that full life cycle. And so we have to know what we could buy. We have to know what we did buy. We want to know what we're using. We want to know what our friends are using. We want to know what our friends' categorizations are. What decisions are they going to be making? I'm part of the project. I was working with the governance group, and one of the key, at this point at least, sort of the key use case is you have 3 universities that are going to partner together for Ukraine studies collection. 2 of the partners are actively right now purchasing and collecting material, and a third partner is planning to join in the future. And so you have to account for not only all of this data that is listed here, but also sort of what are the relationships that we're going to have with each other in terms of organizations as we go forward. So a lot of interesting data to sort of model here. And we're really excited about the opportunity to leverage MetaDB as part of the core hub of all of that interaction. And again, I think that the point of this talk was really to talk about, sure, MetaDB or LDP in the FOLIO world, or maybe in the reshare world as well, is relatively well understood in terms of what its role is. But it has definitely a future above and beyond FOLIO and reshare. All right, so I'm actually quick and I'm done with my slides, but open for questions, discussion, and certainly any other ideas to leverage this type of technology. Yes, sir. So the difference between LDP and MetaDB is really table structure and schema change. So we made the first iteration of LDP was for Folio at least had some bespoke mappings, normalizations, naming conventions. And with MetaDB, it's been more generalized. And so, for example, LDP, a lot of the stuff is in the public schema. Almost nothing's in the public schema in MetaDB. But there is very much maybe not one-to-one, but there's a very clear mapping of LDP queries, schemas, table names, that kind of thing to MetaDB. But there are also some other changes as well from MetaDB to LDP, how history is stored as an example in MetaDB history for records. And so that's one of the things I didn't mention, but every time let's just use an item record as an example. Every time MetaDB sees the item record, it writes new data into tables. And so you're able to go back and sort of walk through the history of an item through MetaDB. Same thing was done in LDP, but it was done in a different way in different tables. And so there are some things that are sort of a shift. And MetaDB really was sort of an upgrade of good idea for LDP, but sort of the overall design and architecture was sort of improved and made more scalable in MetaDB. So for customers or folks that are running LDP now, the move to MetaDB is going to have to happen. And we have examples, and there are institutions that have gone through that migration. Yeah, I don't know if I would say from scratch, because you have something and it's sort of a modification. So it's not really scratch, but it is a modification. Go ahead. So plans for data privacy and data protection. I guess one thing that is interesting that comes to mind is LDP had a feature for anonymization of data going into from Folio into LDP. And in the experience that we had with all of our customers, which were primarily or exclusively actually US customers, nobody used that feature. They turned anonymization off. And so when we were creating the Metadb software, that was not a feature that we included in the initial releases and still is not today. So I've talked to a number of particularly German, but other European Folio sites that would love to use this software, but they can't until the anonymization stuff is built back in. So that's one of the things that we have on our roadmap is to go address that. And I guess nothing else is coming to mind in terms of software around data privacy and so forth. Obviously, from a hosting perspective, there are procedures and things that are done. But in terms of the actual Metadb LDP software, nothing else is coming to mind. So if there are ideas or requirements, we would love to have those fleshed out. Yep.
This idea of something now that it takes to be have it and so let's see it here now. Yes, that's actually this is a thing that we so I get that into
So it's really the way I think about it is it's really a data warehouse type of activity. And so you need to understand the data. You want to think about the reporting needs that you're going to have once it's in there. And that drives sort of what kinds of table and schema design that you'll have, where you put indexes, how you migrate the data in. And so that it's actually fairly mundane in terms of what actually has to happen. It's very difficult. It can be, but it's not very complicated what actually has to happen. So you sort of have to map out the data with an eye towards what kind of reporting is going to need to happen. And then you do it. We have helped some of our customers do this, but it's not because we have some special knowledge and understanding that only we have. It's pretty generalized because at that point, so the secret sauce that we've added with Folio or Reshare is we took the time to sort of understand the relationships, understand the data types, make transformations that made sense, understand sort of what the reporting requirements were from the community, because there was a community out there in the Folio reporting SIG that was sort of declaring all these things. And so we built that into the software because we knew Folio and Reshare were going to be sort of key users or clients of the software. But for more generalized, we want to use some other data sets. It's really just an open data warehouse. It's a Postgres data warehouse. Yes, sir. No, I was anticipating that question. So we Index Data have maybe 8 organizations that are still using LDP. And again, to be totally transparent, LDP is more expensive for us to run than MetaDB, primarily because we need a server instance that is powerful enough to ingest all of the collection nightly. So you have to get, you can't take 26 hours to process the data because, then you're messed up. So we're trying to get sites move from LDP to MetaDB, but we're not forcing it down anybody's throat. We're busy, they're busy. There is work to be done as we've mentioned. And so we're kind of hoping for 2025. But we realize that this is not something that we can sort of that people are going to want to be forced into a short time frame. So we're going to give plenty of notice, and so we're hoping for 2025. We're already we Index Data are already spending most of our time on MetaDB. So I really look at it more from an operational perspective than sort of a code maintenance perspective. I would start thinking about it now, because it's coming, but it's not going to be, hey, next month. So that's so the question for those of you online, question was, what are the performance goals for the original sync from Folio to MetaDB? So I don't think that we have really good non-functional requirements in that area. So we've sort of tried to improve it to the extent practical. So for those of you who don't know, it can take 72 hours to get a large collection from Folio into MetaDB the first time. And so that's, I think that's 72 hours, like 3 days. Is that right? So sometimes up to 5. And so we try to work through that. We've done the actual release that I mentioned earlier, we're hoping to get tested in October, has some changes to try to drive that time down. And so one of the things that EBSCO contributed was the concept of encode to deal with a Kafka queue concurrently. So not to get too in the weeds, but basically if the first iteration of MetaDB had one consumer from the Kafka queue, and so everything was single threaded. And now we have a configuration where you can have multiple consumers off of that Kafka queue, so things are able to be introduced in parallel. Of course, you can't have so many consumers that you overwhelm the database, and so there's a balance there that has to be struck. We've also made some changes with respect to JSON arrays and transforming them, and being smarter about when we have to go through the work of transforming those JSON arrays into tables, and being a little bit smarter about data that we've seen before. And this is not necessarily on the initial sync, but sometimes you need to restart a synchronization process, and that can also be time consuming. And so we've introduced some logic around being smarter about that. And so hopefully that helps keep some of those times down as well. The architecture of your MetaDB and how you deal with multiple environments and how you deal with upgrades can also have an impact on how often you have to do these resyncs. And these resyncs can be, like I said, long days. And so you want to try to avoid them if you can. So that's one of the things that we're sort of we have more goals than we have time to achieve, and so we're having to sort of pick through. One of the things that we're working on right now, and I guess I didn't mention this, is transforming JSON arrays directly as part of the ingest, as opposed to relying on derived tables. And so since we have a little time, I'm going to explore this a little bit for people that are used to the system. Basically, you have these operational databases in Folio. I'm going to go back to this diagram here. And so every module has its own storage. And so these are literally different database. You can think of them as logical databases. And so all the storage, or all the structure inside these databases is primarily JSON, which is efficient, and the databases have been designed for quick operation. You want to check in, check out. You don't want to take 8 seconds on a check in and check out. So you design the database to be really fast and normalized and all that kind of stuff. Turns out that that's not great for reporting, because you have to join a bunch of tables to get from the codes to the text that people know about. And so what we've done historically and continue to do is unpack that JSON and take those key value pairs that are in the JSON and put those in columns. Well, one approach that sometimes you need to join a couple of different, you might want to join users with items to do some circulation stuff or other kinds of reports. And so instead of landing with these analytic databases that are fast to report, but you still have to do a bunch of joins, sometimes we've created derived tables. So we take from the primary tables, we do a query and create this new table based on the query. So that's a derived table. So that works great. And it worked great from some sense in LDP because this was a batch mode thing. And so you got new folio data every night. You could run your derived tables creation every night. So your derived tables were in sync with your folio tables. Everything was hunky-dory. In MetaDB, your folio tables are now up to the second, but your derived tables only run once a night. So problemo. So how do we reconcile that? So we're looking at transforming the JSON sort of on the fly. Of course, that takes time. The derived tables on a large site might take 13 hours to run for LDP. And so can we, how do we distribute those 13 hours when you're streaming data? It becomes kind of a little bit of a tricky math problem. And so we're introducing some capabilities to do that now, allowing the operator to configure which JSON paths get transformed. And so that's one of the things that we're looking forward to testing is how hard can we push this for normal updates? What does it do to the sync times? We want to obviously keep our eye on that, but that's one of the features that's coming up. Yeah, it will ship with default. So it's kind of analogous to MetaDB has sort of table, like a whitelisting of these are the tables that we want to pull in. So Folio might have 500 tables and we might exclude 130 tables. I'm making that up totally, but we might exclude, those amount of tables because they're just not of any reporting value, or they're really very complicated and have, sort of minute value. So just like those are sort of come out of the box with recommendations, we'll have the same kind of thing for these transforms. We're going to be working very closely with the reporting SIG in Folio to understand sort of, and we're starting with, these are the derived tables that people use and work with today. So how can we take those and sort of implement them in the automatic transformation? So that great point. That's another thing we're looking to formalize, but a little ad hoc, but essentially using the derived tables queries as well as other queries that people have to make sure that you have sort of same results is one of the things that we do. So for institutions, I'll repeat the question. So for institutions that have created their own queries, is it up to them to retest them when they're implementing a new? Yes. Right now, and that's part of what we're going to make better is nobody really knows what we're doing to test these things, right? And so we're going to put that out there and allow everyone to know these are the queries that we're using to test this. If you have something outside of this, you may want to test it on your own. Might want to add it to the community list. And so the folks at CU Boulder don't really know what they've signed up for yet, but we're going to try to help them. And so we're working through sort of how can we involve the community to try to drive that the amount of work down for any individual site or organization.
I'm interested here, there will be discussion with that LDP. And I am putting a new open project, and we're trying to become. I'd be interested to hear about LDP journey as an incubation project and what is that into.
I would say that it was useful for us as a stepping stone to being a full project. We always knew we wanted to be a full project, but we really didn't have the time to do some of the formalization that we needed to do in order to be that full project. I think Tom is a great guy to talk to who's in front of you to help understand sort of what that process looks like. We're really excited because both because we think we're in a position to take advantage of being a full project, but also because of the things that we're going to get back from the OLF in terms of some infrastructure and other assistance that we just sort of need as a modern open source project.
Talk about libraries or say practice.
So thank you. We have, in terms of number of libraries that are using LDP or Metadb, I'm going to say in the 20 range, roughly 20. I don't know if you guys, if EBSCO has a sense. I'm sure you have a sense for how many you have that you guys are servicing. Right now, and that's one of the challenges we're trying to correct. Being a contributor to LDP has been, you kind of had to know somebody, and we're trying to make that a little bit more transparent. One of the things that we've done is we've established a governance model, which we will be publishing. We're going to be publishing a committers page for our GitHub repository to give instruction to how we want to accept and what we can do to sort of process requests. And so a lot of, we're using the, as I said, sort of an inflection point to make all of this more common, more open, more transparent.
That basically that's the case. So the upgrades that you have the same transactions in those systems. But in the FOLIO so that's one of the reasons I suggested for that line at the same time. So you're just doing the side by side.
Right. Yeah, that's correct. Yep. Good point. Every tenant gets its own data warehouse. So by design, LDP is not a multi-tenant system. Every system gets it. Every tenant gets its own data warehouse. Yep.
That's not
So.
Yes. So the question is really in this diagram that we have here, how are we securing the connection between the Folio instances and the Metadb database? There's a VPN between the networks is how that's been handled. Network level, yeah. All right, so I hear noise outside the doors, and I think we're pretty close to time. Any final thoughts or questions? Is there a plan to introduce managed services for MetaDB? I kind of think we've done that with Stanford. But in terms of more formal managed services, I don't know. That's a good question. We haven't thought about we're not at Index yet, at least we don't have a huge marketing department. So we'll have to think about how to move with that idea. Okay. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Take care. And thank everybody online.